hello everyone. This is Amani Sawari. We are here with the community in Wisconsin, as well as the Equal Justice Society, which is based in California. And I'm really excited to be doing this second follow-up presentation for folks who are supporting incarcerated citizens with getting their stimulus funding. If you all joined on Facebook, you should see the live stream link on the event page. So just make sure you click on that. Or you can just simply come to the YouTube channel. Please share this video. This live stream will be saved and recorded to the YouTube channel. So make sure to save this link. You should see the live stream link on the event page. And we've got our speakers here on Zoom. If you guys hear some feedback, try to mute the YouTube video on your end, because I think there's a 20-second delay. So we're gonna wait a couple more minutes for folks to jump onto the live stream, and then we're just gonna jump into the presentation. We have Darren Mack, who is an amazing community organizer and advocate based out of New York. And he's going to be fielding the YouTube comments. So if you have any questions as they pop up throughout the presentation, just type that into the comment box. No question is too small. Whether you're asking for a link, or you didn't hear something, or you want us to repeat something, or maybe there's a unique case that's been going on, an error code that you've never seen before, just type that into the chat box. Darren will make sure that our presenters see your question so that we can respond to that. And if there's a link you're asking for, Darren will also have those available for you. We'll also have helpful links embedded throughout the presentation. And these presentation slides will be available on swarmy.org/coronavirus-relief after this presentation. All right, so we're gonna give people another minute or so. Thank y'all for being a part. Please share this video. I'm gonna give y'all a minute to share the video with 5 people right now. You got 60 seconds. You don't want them to miss this. I know that you know 5 people who need to know this information. So get to sharing it, post it on Twitter, post it on YouTube, make sure that people can see and have access to these resources. All right, it is 4:05. We're gonna spend the first 20-ish minutes going through these slides. Like I said, as you have questions, type them into the comment box and we'll get to them. And then we're gonna spend the last 20, 30 minutes Q&A, depending on how many questions come in. All right. And I guess I'll let my co-speakers introduce themselves really quickly too before I jump into this presentation. You want to go ahead, Shannon?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Shannon Ross. I run an organization called The Community in Wisconsin, based in Milwaukee, but we try to help anybody in Wisconsin, and we are open to helping people outside of Wisconsin as well. It's just not as an area where it's comfortable with knowledge-wise. I personally just got out of prison about 40 some days ago. I did 17 years straight. So I'm still balancing a bit, but I feel like I have a very good grasp of everything and it hasn't been an issue. So I'm very much willing and able to, help a variety of people with this and other endeavors that I have coming up. So, and if you ever try to reach us, thecommunitynow.us is our website, and the email to me is on there and any of our staff, and communicating with us directly with any questions. Happy to help.
Thank you, Shannon, for being here. He's amazing.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. And then we also have Mona.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Amani. It's great to be here with Amani, Shannon, and Darren. My name is Mona Tawatow, and I'm the legal director at the Equal Justice Society. We are a civil rights organization, and our legal team is working with the legal team at the law firm of Lieff Cabraser on this case. And I'm here to help answer questions and support the community and what Amani, Shannon, and Darren are doing. Our law firm, our legal organization focuses on civil rights. We're based in Oakland, California, but we are a national organization. We're very concerned about injustices and unfairness in the system, which is why we are part of this case. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. So like I said, the presentation is live streaming and being recorded on YouTube. We're also recording via Zoom. So we have started the recording. All right, so here is our agenda for today. The issues that we're going to cover as we go through this presentation are the CARES Act initially, how it was drafted, and some of the obstacles that folks face as they try to get access to those funds, recent updates to the CARES Act that expanded the eligibility and the number of folks that were able to apply. We're also going to go through some of the eligibility requirements for having access to funds, the required information that's needed in order to submit an application. We're going to go through the paper application procedure. The paper application deadline is in a couple of days, so definitely pay attention to that. And then the online application procedure as well, which has a longer deadline, closer to the end of the month. And then we're also going to go over some common error codes, some common issues that folks are facing that we've seen repeatedly. And then we'll have open discussion, open questions for the Q&A portion. Okay, so going through the CARES Act and how it was initially drafted. CARES Act stands for the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act. And that was passed by Congress earlier in the year in the first quarter of 2020. And it's an over $2 trillion economic relief package for citizens of the United States to give relief, provide relief for folks who are suffering as a result of the COVID-19 coronavirus pandemic. The relief was targeted to families, American workers, small businesses, in order to attempt to help people with preserving their jobs and preserving some sense of security during the pandemic and statewide lockdowns and such. So some initial obstacles that we encountered with the way that the CARES Act was initially introduced was that it did not initially carve out people in prison. However, many incarcerated citizens were denied payment. So when initially looking at the CARES Act, it did not say that incarcerated people did not have access. People who have Social Security numbers, who are citizens of the United States, were all eligible. And so there were folks that did attempt to apply on behalf of their incarcerated loved ones. There were incarcerated folks who attempted to apply and they were denied. And then some folks who were distributed funding were actually asked to pay back the funds. And people after the fact were instructed not to submit. And so I know in the beginning, I did try to file on behalf of people in March and in April, and they were denied solely due to their incarceration. And so as a result, we ran into those obstacles. So some recent updates to the CARES Act include benefits. Individuals can receive up to $1,200 per person, $2,400 for married couples that are filing jointly, plus $500 for each qualifying child. So these are benefits that were initially given to folks as they applied, citizens, but they were not openly available to people in prison. Now, these benefits are also available to people in prison as well. As a result, of Lieff Cabraser's work, their incredible groundbreaking work, allowed that access to be expanded and include people in prison. And so now, EIP, which stands for Economic Impact Payment 2020 forms, the 1040 form distribution has happened across the country. And so people in prison should have access to the forms that they need. Initially, we did our best to mail those forms in. A lot of those forms got rejected. And so all facilities with eligible inmates, people with valid Social Security numbers, have been supplied with the following forms: the EIP 1040 forms, a legal notice that instructs prisons to distribute those forms to eligible inmates, as well as instructions on completing those forms and how folks can fill out those forms in order to receive their payment. Also wanted to make a note about direct deposit. There is a way for people in prison to receive the funds either by check or by direct deposit. A lot of people have been trying to get the direct deposit in order to avoid administrative fees or deductions that the prison may try to force on checks that come in that they have to facilitate getting into trust accounts. There are some states, for example, I'm in Michigan, where people cannot have more than a certain cap amount. In Michigan, it's $300 in their trust fund. And so it is more wise to have another account that those funds can be deposited into so that that cap isn't reached. And we are going to go over some ways that folks can use online banking alternatives like Chime, Cash App, or Venmo. These are all banks that do give you a bank account and routing number that you can use on your application. However, in some cases, this doesn't happen for everybody. There are accounts that are flagged that need extra identification. So if that happens, for example, in Chime, if you put in a Social Security number and a permanent address to set up an account that don't match, and you're asked to submit a driver's license, and that person never had a driver's license, then you might want to try using a different online banking account alternative, like Cash App or Venmo. If you already have Cash App on your phone linked to your phone number, then use Venmo because you can't set up both. Shannon, did you want to add anything so far to that? Because I know that that's a point that a lot of people have been struggling with.
Yeah, no, we haven't really told a lot of people about the details of that because that was an area I found out about kind of late, that they could set up an account. And I think the one I mentioned was Chime, because I know with Cash App, it seemed like you had to have an account beforehand to set up the account. So yeah, that's an area that I would definitely let you speak to more because you have more expertise on that area than me.
Okay, cool. So with the online banking account options, there are a lot of different ones. I say Chime because that's what I use and that's what I know works. There are multiple people who said, yes, set up the Chime account. I was able to get the funds. It took about 3 weeks after the application was approved in order to get those funds. And all you need to do is set up the account. And all I used was the Social Security number and their permanent address. This was an address that they lived at prior to being incarcerated, and it was linked to them prior to their incarceration, which is why it wasn't flagged for them to submit any additional identification because there was already a match. If you try to use someone's Social Security number with your address, that's why you might need additional verification. So make sure that you ask them what the last address was or the last address that they were linked to, because that's going to be the easiest way for the account to match up immediately so that it can be opened. If it doesn't work, if you're having problems with that, I would suggest just simply having them go the check route. They don't have to put a direct deposit numbers on their application. They can just omit that portion and have a check mailed to their permanent address if they don't want the check to be mailed to the facility. When the check is mailed to their permanent address, during that time, you can work on setting them up a bank account. You can have one set up through a different online banking alternative and then deposit the check later. That's another alternative that you can use. You could also mail the check to them at the facility at a later date, but make sure that they fill out the application as soon as possible. It doesn't have to have direct deposit information on it. You can deposit the check at a later date if it's not working at that time. So don't hold up your application just because you can't get that direct deposit information to work. But like I said, it's worked for me with Chime. Just make sure that you use an address that they were associated with their social security number prior.
I was going to comment on one thing.
Yeah.
I know in our experience here, we were telling people they could have the checks preferably sent to someone on the outside because we were telling them probably don't deal with the DOC, with the prison system. You don't know what they're going to do, if they're going to be goofy about it as they kind of are still being right now. But we discovered later that it's very difficult, if not impossible, to get a treasury check cashed, even if you're the POA. So you can get a bank account, I believe, set up for somebody if you're the POA. But these are things that, if you get the check sent home and for whatever reason the bank's not allowing you to set up an account for somebody, even if you're the POA, or to cash it, you can still then send it in to the prison at any time. You have a year to cash a treasury check. So, and when I talked to the IRS, they confirmed that for me. They said, yeah, it shouldn't be any different. They didn't seem to even know for sure themselves, but from what I've seen and what I've read and what they, said they believe as well, that this is gonna act like any other treasury check and it'll be good for a year. So you have time to figure things out if you want to get around whatever the DOC is going to try and do. And then worst case scenario, eventually you might have to send it in.
I appreciate you adding that. That's a really good point. All right, moving on to eligibility check. First, citizenship status. You must be a U.S. citizen or legal permanent resident in order to have access to these funds. If you're married, check whether or not the person is married. If you're not married to someone who lacks a social security number or have a child who lacks one, unless your spouse served in the armed forces in 2019. So this is checking if you're married. Yes, make sure that if you're filing jointly with someone, don't file jointly with someone who doesn't have a social security number. If they don't have a valid social security number, just file as an individual for yourself. You cannot file for a child who doesn't have a social security number. Just file individually for yourself. That's going to be the best way that you'll have access to the funds. So if you're not sure about the social security number status of someone that you want to file with jointly, I would just say not filing jointly with them, just file individually. Tax filings. If you filed a tax return in 2018 or 2019, or you were exempt from doing so because your income was lower than the threshold. And for a lot of folks who are incarcerated, your income is going to be lower than the threshold. So you're not going to be disqualified from having access to these funds just because you didn't file your taxes in either 2018 or 2019. And then also make sure that you weren't claimed as a dependent on another person's tax returns. So I know some folks have been having issue because they were claimed as a dependent on someone else's tax return in 2019. So just make sure maybe if you've worked with someone who filed in the past and claimed you as a dependent, make sure that that wasn't the case this year, and they didn't file you as a dependent of them in 2019 before you file. You might see some delay in your application, but delay is not denial. So just because things are taking time, do not fret, do not worry. And then also instruct your person on the loved one to your loved one, your person on the inside to file using the paper forms that they have available to them if they meet all of these requirements. So you can screenshot this and send it to them, make sure that they know these eligibility check questions and that they are able to reflect that in their application.
Amani, I just wanted to add something or clarify something on the citizenship status. So as Amani says, and as the slide says, US citizen or legal permanent resident, or LPR as it's sometimes called. And that means that the person has a green card or you have a green card. So just to say what that technical term means, probably a lot of you know that already, but just to be sure.
Yes, thank you so much for clarifying that. We can never make things, more simple and more clear for folks to understand, especially as we go through these more technical terms. Anything you wanted to add to this slide, Shannon?
No, that's an area that you guys covered just perfect.
All right. What information do I need to have before filling out a claim? So this is an important slide, especially if you're filing on behalf of someone, to have these bullet points in front of you. We know phone calls are short. We might not be able to go through the entire online application with them on the phone, but if you have these details, then you can do that off the phone after you've gotten these details from them and the permission that you need from them in order to file on their behalf. So make sure that you have their full name, first, last, hyphenated, middle, every legal aspect of their name that they are aware of, their mailing address. So if they don't mind having their check, if they prefer having their check mailed to the facility, you can use that as the mailing address. Also, their permanent address. So you can use an address that they were associated with prior to their incarceration. Maybe they filed a tax return at an address prior to their incarceration. That would be a great address to use. But make sure you have a mailing address for them. Also with the full name, a part of their name is going to also be their prison ID number. So make sure that you either attach that to their mailing address or to their last name. I know some people have been adding it to the last name portion. Some people have been adding it to the end of the mailing address. Did either Shannon or Mona, do you think there's a preference on that? Where the prison ID number should go?
Yeah, it's supposed to be after the last name, I believe.
Okay.
Correct. Yeah, that's the better. I will just say that if for some reason people have filed already and it isn't right there, we've been told by the IRS that they would, it would be okay, but it's best to do what Shannon said.
Okay.
For the name.
So make sure that the prison ID number is added after the last name, similarly to how you would put it on your envelope. Also, email address. You can make a new email address for them if you'd like, or you can use one that you've used. I know that the community in Wisconsin, you all have used one email address for up to 5 applications. Mm-hmm. So if someone has filed online for themselves, they wouldn't have any problems with using that same email to file online for someone on the inside or multiple someones on the inside. Also make sure that they have the date of birth, valid social security number, and if they want to use the direct deposit option, then the bank account and the routing number associated with the account that has their name attached to it. And then for each qualifying child, name, social security number, or adoption taxpayer ID number, and then the relationship to the child or to your spouse.
The routing number and bank account, though, again, that's not a necessary thing to have to file. Yeah, you can.
Exactly. You don't need it. You can use it, but if you're not sure or if they don't have it set up yet, especially if they're paper filing, if it's not set up yet, just fill out the application with all the other necessary information and then set it up later. And I have stars by email address and bank account number because you can set them up a unique one later just for their application, or you can use one that you already have. So let's say you're filing on behalf of your father or your sister. If you don't mind adding their name to your bank account, then that's a great way to expedite the process of getting that direct deposit. As long as their name is attached to that bank account, then you'll be able to put the check in there. But you can't use your personal bank account number that they're not associated with and deposit the check there. That's not going to work. I've gotten that question for a lot of folks. I don't know if anyone else has seen otherwise, but I don't think that is going to work, depositing a check to someone for someone in a different bank account.
Yeah, no, so when I called the bank and I talked to the IRS about that, the bank will actually send it back. They will not even accept that. So what the IRS will then do is they will then send it to whatever physical address you put on there. So it's a complete waste of time if you don't have the person's name, but the person's name has to be on the account in order for it to be accepted.
Perfect. So going through process and procedure, paper versus online, where do you go to file? One tip that I put on here is to instruct the person in prison to submit a paper form as soon as possible, using all the information that they have available to them, especially since the paper form deadline is on November 4th. It's in a couple of days. This is the most secure way for them to get the payment as quickly as possible, because they filled out this paper, it has their signature on it. They can use either the facility address or a permanent address that they're associated with, that they want the check mailed to, but that's going to be the best way. So have them do that as quickly as possible. And I said, whether or not they can do the direct deposit, this is the most secure way to get payments. If they don't have a bank account set up, even if they want to set one up at a later date, they can, but make sure that they get that paper application in before the paper application deadline on Wednesday. So here is what the paper form looks like. And the instructions and guidelines for the paper form can be found on my website or Lieff Cabraser's website as well. And they've got some guidelines and highlighted portions of the form that are on the next slide. But read the full notice from the law firm. It's going to be really helpful in your understanding what the prisons were told when they were given the forms to distribute, so that you can instruct your loved ones of what language to use if they're being told that they don't have access to the forms, or someone doesn't know where to find the forms. They should have access to the forms. They're legal documents that everyone who's eligible for this payment should have access to. And they can use that language when they are asking for the forms from prison staff. And the paper forms must be postmarked no later than November 4th. So some people are worried because we're already at the 2nd, and they think that it's not going to get to the IRS office in time. It's okay. It just has to be postmarked by the 4th. So as long as they can get it into the mailroom's hands to get it postmarked and sent out by Wednesday, then that's fine. So they have more than enough time at this point to get that done. And the top of the form is going to say EIP return or EIP 2020 in order to indicate that this is a tax filing specifically for the purpose of getting those economic impact payments, and not just filing taxes for the year. So make sure that that's yes.
One question before it gets too far. I just thought maybe I should point it out before it gets too far from that. You mentioned about the I just mentioned it about just before you were talking about that. The filing, that's right, the deadline. The IRS put out a letter saying that they actually are encouraging prisons to tell guys to keep filing, to keep submitting the paper forms even after the 4th. So it's like they're unofficially saying we're going to keep honoring this because we know it's bullshit in a sense. So they seem to be still letting them come in even if it's after the date. So just keep trying, even if it's after the 4th, even if you're late. But also, organizations like ours will still try to help you file before the 21st online deadline.
I think that's really good advice. That's the same thing that we heard, Shannon. The only thing is, so by all means, do what Shannon is advising. The IRS claims that it has all these things to process from everyone. So the sooner you can get it in, the closer to the 4th. Like if you can't do it on the 4th, the sooner you can do it, the better, because if they're not able to process it by December 31st, they can't. So, and they've got a backlog. So absolutely right message. Just make sure you do it ASAP.
And on top of that as well, if a person is not able to file this year, I believe, I might have this wrong, you can clarify for me, Mona, if you can still file next year on the regular tax time comes, and it's some kind of, I forget the specific term or how you do it, but you can still file and get it next year, even if you miss out for whatever reasons this year, I believe, right?
Yes, you can. You can do that. It's just, if you do it this year, then obviously, and you
don't want to wait, qualify,
then you'll get it sooner. But yes, you are allowed to do that. I think, we and the law firm are trying to get the IRS, for those who are going to file next year, to make it a more simple process like this year. They haven't committed to doing that, but we're trying. But yes, you're right about that, Shannon. That's right.
Thank you both. That's a really good point. I personally didn't know that they would continue to honor beyond November 4th. Um, so that's really good information for folks who are nervous about the deadline approaching. Um, like Mona said, still don't, just wait. Try to do it as quickly as possible. And then for folks who are really frustrated or anxious about the deadline coming up, and the end of the year being so close, there is still an opportunity for folks to have access to those funds or credit for those funds in the new year or after the new year. So people are still working on it. People are still going to be working on your behalf. There's a whole wide network of organizations, individuals, groups that are making sure that people who are impacted by this unjust system have what they deserve as citizens, and their rights are not denied to these protections. So, like I said, delay is not denial. And this is the paper form that's available on the law firm's website. And this was also included in the most recent Soiree Media newsletter. We had a whole page that had this template on it that walked people through what needs to be filled out on the form and how to fill it out. On this form, which is why there was confusion about where to put the prison ID number, it is next to the address. Now, the IRS does know that to look there if it's not on the last name, but it should be next to the last name. Aside from that, everything else is the same. Make sure the social security number is here. And we know that the forms can be long and complex, but there's a lot of things that you don't even have to worry about filling out, especially if you don't have any dependents and if you're not filing jointly. Just make sure that you have your mailing information, your social security number here, down in these sections that you have that income here. And this is going to apply to a lot of incarcerated folks. And I would just say everyone, just because I don't think that anyone's making over, $1,000 a month on the inside. So you can just simply put $1 here to indicate the earnings at those 3 lines. And then if you have direct deposit information, then that would be in this section over here, in the refund section, if you have a bank account to link. If you don't, it's not required. You can skip all of this and then just sign here. And these are the forms that are going to be available, that are now available and have been available to people in prison since the end of October. So make sure that they can find those 1040 forms and that they fill out the sections that are highlighted here. Anyone wanted to point out anything on the form, the paper form? All right, and then on the law firm's website, you can find, depending on what state you're in, where to mail your paper form to. And if you're in Michigan or California, just because I'm in Michigan and the law firm's in California, this is where you mail your form, but there's an entire list of places to mail the form. That's also going to be included with the instructions with the form at the prison. So the facilities have this list. Make sure that it's being mailed to the correct place. And I think, if it's not mailed to the correct place, it'll get to the correct place. So don't fret. If someone told you, I know that I've gotten calls from people on the inside, they mailed it mistakenly to the wrong place. It's okay. If you want to fill out the form again and mail it again, you can. But don't fret, it will go to the right place. And then there's also a hotline that folks can call. If you are on the outside, you can call the IRS Economic Impact Payment hotline. Call this number if you have questions. There is an automatic recording that goes through a list of common questions prior to connecting to a live representative. And then loved ones on the outside can also reach the law firm. This is actually a more dependable number, in my opinion. They get back to you quicker. And then if it's not possible for someone on the inside to call on your behalf, you can also call collect. Incarcerated folks can call Root and Rebound. And I'll read out the numbers. I know folks were having trouble seeing the numbers last time I did the presentation. So the IRS number is 800-919-9835. The law firm's number is 415-956-1000. And then Root and Rebound's number that prisoners can call collect is 510-271-4662. And so no matter if you're on the inside or the outside, there is a place that you can call to talk to someone and ask them about your unique situation. So these are those numbers. All right. So
Money, I just wanted to add something to the what you said about the addresses. So what you said is absolutely right from what we heard from the IRS, that people shouldn't worry if they sent it to the wrong address, as long as it's one of those addresses listed for the IRS to receive these forms. There was some confusion that we heard about an Austin, Texas address, which is the IRS has designated this one Austin, Texas address for these special these EIP payments to folks inside. And then people were worried, like, if I didn't send it to Austin, what happens and all that. So you may see that in the materials that you get, but don't worry, because we've been assured that they will be processed wherever they go.
Thank you for that, Mona. I appreciate you adding that. I know a lot of people were worried, after finally getting the forms and finally filling them out. Oh, I've mailed it to the wrong place. So yes, you will be fine as long as it's one of those offices, those IRS offices that are listed. So for the online form, this is the link that you will use to get to the online form. And this is just a snapshot of what the homepage looks like for the non-filers form. It's free to submit, and it has the benefits and the eligibility on there as well. Just, as a recap, on the homepage, you just click that Get Started button, and then it's literally the paper form, just templated out so that you can type right into it. And again, this is something that you can do. Perhaps you'll be able to do it on the phone with the person, but as long as you have the required information that were listed in the earlier slide, then you'll be able to go through the online form, even if you don't have the person, on the phone with you. And you can also exit out of the form and save it if you run into a complication. And then you can get back into it using the email that you have linked to the form. If you run into an error, a complication, or if you don't know the answer to a question or whatever, and you want to get back in contact with the incarcerated loved one to resolve that prior to finally submitting the form. Another good idea is to just go through the form. Maybe you want to wait. We've gotten to the 21st to submit this. So maybe you get the information from them, go through the form online, wait to talk to them again, run through the form with them on the phone, and then submit while they're on the phone as well, since you can log out and log back in. So this is where you'll get access to that form. So here are some common error and rejection codes that I've seen people ask about the most since we've been putting this in. And really with these error codes, there might just be a slight mix up in the name and the social security number. So if there's dependents on there, if they've been claimed already, they cannot be claimed again by the person on the inside. So if you're constantly getting the first error code, the business rule error code, you might want to remove the dependents from the application and try to resubmit. And that's been a common solution to that problem. It could be because the social security numbers don't match the name, or because they've already been claimed. And then in the second one, the X-0051, this is for either the person or their dependents. The information is not matching up with the name, the address, or the social security number. So check and make sure that the permanent address that you have on the application, if it's not the prison address, that it is an address that they were associated with prior. Check if they've ever filed their taxes or a tax form of any sort. If they do have some tax filings with the IRS, then use that address because that's going to match records. You'll get this error code if you use their social security number and attach it to your address and you don't have any association with them according to the IRS. So try to figure out what that is. If you can't find an address that matches, then use the prison address that will match. And then also with the name, some people have hyphenated names that they've been using since they were a child, but it's not hyphenated according to IRS records, or maybe the first hyphenated part is attached to their middle name. So another thing you could do is try playing with the names, their name and how it's arranged in the boxes. Try moving the hyphenated part of their name to the middle name, or try moving the middle name over to the last name. Some people don't remember how it looks on their birth certificate because they haven't seen it in decades. And I know that this was a solution that someone sent to me, that the hyphenated last name was actually an addition to the middle name on their birth certificate. So try playing with that for error code number 2. And then for the third column of error codes, the primary spouse or dependent's identity, their PIN doesn't match the IRS records. And so if you are getting an error because the PIN isn't correct, that's a reason to call IRS. Try to do it without the PIN. You don't have to put a PIN in to submit the form. So there's 2 places where it asks for a PIN. If they've never submitted a form before, then there's no PIN. If they've never filed taxes before, then they don't have a PIN to use. Don't put anything in there. It's not going to work. If they're creating a new one, just make sure that they remember what that is, so that it matches when you put that in. And at the end, I think you do have to create a PIN by the end of it. Yeah. So make sure.
It's like 2 spots below the first one, so it's kind of confusing. So they ask you about your past filing PIN, and then like 2-3 questions down, it says create a brand new PIN.
Mm-hmm. So yes, if they've never filed, then don't put anything in the past filing PIN, and then you will create a new PIN by the end of it, and just make sure that it's something that they can remember, something that they have access to. And then the final one, the most detrimental one that's been freaking people out, the taxpayer social security number was claimed already by someone. This one, check and make sure the social security number is correct, that it is their social security number. Some people I've gotten the comment, they've made up a social security number. You can't do that. That's not going to work. Make sure that it is your social security number that you're using. You make one up, and if it's somebody else's, they've already got their payment. You're not going to get theirs. And then if it is yours, and you've made sure, and there have been in some states, for example, in Texas, they've created a task force specifically for making sure that people locate their social security numbers that don't have them. Make sure that you ask your counselor, staff, admin, what your social security number is and that it's correct, that it's the same as what you remembered, so that you add that to the form. And if you still get the R-902-01 error code, and someone else has used your social security number, then that's going to be a reason to call the IRS hotline. Has anyone ran into that and have any other solutions that they want to provide to folks who may have gotten that error code?
I don't know about that. No, I mean, another one that we've seen is people who were labeled as already filed, and they say nobody filed for me, I didn't file. So then the possibility of fraud comes up, of identity theft. And so when I spoke to the IRS about this, they said that because you can no longer file online, in that case, you have to file a paper form to do that. And then they will on their own figure things out. Because once they get a paper form from the person who was actually supposed to be, they'll figure, okay, this person's already filed. Why is somebody else checking into it? I was told that you don't necessarily have to also write a letter explaining things, but I think you also should write to whatever local IRS agency in your state is and say, okay, I filed the paper form, and I was told that somebody filed for me online and I was labeled as already filed, and this did not have happened. Nobody filed for me. So I just want to make it clear that I'm filing my paper, but also, can you look into who filed for me under my social security number? Because that's not me. And they'll figure that out. It's pretty easy to figure out who did it. They have all the information they need for that.
Thank you, Shannon. That's a really good point. So if you've gotten this error code, fill out the paper form, even if it's post the 4th, maybe someone's helping you on the 15th, file online, and you just realize that you've gotten this error code and there's a potential for fraud. Fill out the paper form and attach a letter as well explaining. And you could also have the person send you a screenshot of that error and print that out and attach that as well. But if you didn't file and you didn't get the funds, then you are still entitled to those funds. There might be a delay in locating where the problem is, but delay is not denial. So make sure that you still file that paper form, because it will have your signature on it, and it'll be the most secure way that the IRS can say, like, okay, this is you. So obviously this other person wasn't, and you can write a letter explaining why you're filing the paper form after the deadline or whatever. And like Mona said earlier, the deadline is fluctuating. It's been fluctuating since it first came out on the 15th. So don't worry about it. File your paper form if you get that error code. So those are the most common rejection codes, but you can find a full list of rejection codes and the reasons behind them using this link down here. So here are some common issues to address. And then following that, we will check the comments. We have been answering questions throughout as we see them, but we'll make sure and check if there's anything that we've missed, and you can type them in as well. So lost or forgotten social security number, we touched on that. Some states have assigned staff to helping folks locate their social security numbers during this time, but make sure that you know your correct social security number and do not make one up to fill out the form, because that's just going to cause an issue, a bigger issue. Also for your online account. So some bank accounts, the online accounts, require additional identification in order to eliminate fraud. So maybe it's been 50 plus years since the person has had a driver's license. And the banking app is asking you to submit a driver's license. You can use a driver's license number that they had prior and see if that works. You can use another form of state ID. A prison ID card is a piece of state ID. I haven't been telling people to use a prison ID card because it's hard for people to get a picture of it. There's no way to really get a picture of it. So if you don't have access to some form of identification that they can use to prove who they are to link this bank account, then just try another banking account alternative option. And the three that I have here are Chime, Cash App, and Venmo. If you already have one of those linked to your phone number, then you got to use a different one. And then also with that, if you're not able to get the bank account set up, then just have the check mailed to the person and work on setting up the bank account for a later date. And you can submit it that way. And we all know now with online banking, you can take a picture of the check and it can be submitted. So once you have the bank account set up, you'll be able to take a picture of the check. If you still can't set up the account and it was mailed to the permanent address, then as a final option, as Shannon mentioned before, then you can have it mailed to the facility and the facility can get them the payment that way. And so don't delay filing the form just because you're not able to set up the bank account for whatever reason. Just file the form without the banking information and have the check mailed to the address that the person in prison has identified. Also, do I need a bank card? People have asked me, when you do set up a bank account with Chime or Cash App, they do ask you if you want to use a bank card or if you want a bank card. Me personally, I've gotten the bank card, so I've said yes. It makes it easier to deposit the check. because when you take the bank card to, and for Chime, you can go to like 7-Eleven to deposit and get stuff cashed. So when you have the bank card, it makes it easier for you to do that. So when you take that along with the cap, along with the check to the institution for cashing it, then you're immediately able to do that when you have the bank card, especially if you don't have the ID for the person. So once the check arrives, it'll make it easier for you to cash it that way. Otherwise, like I said, you can just take a picture of it and deposit it that way, but that depends on the banking app that you're using. Not every banking app lets you deposit using a photo. What if you missed the deadline? So I actually put this prior to knowing that the deadlines were flexible, but you are entitled to it in 2021. We want people to have their payments as soon as possible. We know that the economic impact payment, the stimulus funding, is needed now. But if you're unable to work it out to where you file prior to the deadlines, which at this point are November 4th for the paper application, or the 21st for the online application, and you're unable to get it in before the end of the year, then you are still entitled to getting that payment. It'll just be a more complex process in 2021, which I'm sure we will have, the process detailed and templated out for you at that time. But at this point, even if you miss the paper application deadline, you can work with organizations like Sawari Media and the community and the law firm to file online. So if you don't have anyone on the outside that'll file on your behalf, and I'm speaking to people in prison right now, then you can write the community, or you can write Sawari Media, and we will be happy to pair you with someone trusted who can help you do that. Or, and I would say do this anyway, just file the paper application for yourself, even if it's after the deadline, and then you'll get a response and you'll get that check mailed to you. So here's some deadline extensions. Again, November 4th is for the paper application, but it is flexible. So, if it's on the 4th or later this week or next week, still do your best to get your paper application in. Prisons might be saying, oh, it's too late. Demand that you get your paper application. They have them. So demand that you get it. Whether you got to say, I just want to look at it, or I already did it, but I want to, whatever. Demand to get the application so that you can fill it out, or you can have someone on the outside call on your behalf, like, hey, I'm trying to fill out the online application for them, and I want them to be looking at the paper one while I'm doing it. Whatever they have to say so that you get your paper application. But prisons the facility should also be notified that the application deadline is not firm, that it is flexible, and that the IRS does understand that the mailroom is slow, that the post office is slow, and that, especially during this time, and that people are entitled to these funds. And so the people in prison should be entitled to this paperwork. And again, online forms can be submitted through the 21st at this point. And that looks like more of a harder deadline. So please make sure that you connect with someone on the outside. If you're someone on the outside that's looking to connect with people on the inside, make sure that you connect with them prior to the 21st so that you can file for them. And again, here is that link. So we are, yes.
Oh, just to go back over the deadline, the November 4th deadline. I mean, I think the advice to, even if it's past the deadline, to go ahead and try anyway is really important. I think if the IRS is asked, they would say the deadline is November 4th, period. So that is just, where they're coming from, that's probably how they will communicate it, or may be how they communicate it. And so just to make sure that we know that, and also, prison administrators may say, well, I checked with the IRS and they said the deadline is November 4th. That's what they are going to say. the idea of filing after that deadline or filing postmarked after that deadline is still really important, and you should do that. But just know that, where the IRS is coming from and how they may communicate that to the prison officials that is the official deadline. But I think you need to, follow the advice of Shannon and of Amani, because, I think you may as well try. And if the IRS can process it before December 31st, then you will get you're eligible, you will get your funds sooner. And then if that doesn't work, you have this other opportunity to file next year. So I hope that didn't create more confusion, but just the way that I know there has been confusion in terms of the way the IRS has communicated to prison administration and corrections people, and it's gone both ways. So they will say, oh yeah, the deadline is November 4th. And they won't call it a flexible deadline, but the way they will treat things that are postmarked after that, at least they've told us, and apparently they've told Shannon the same thing, that yes, those will come in and we'll look at those and process them, but they might not, if they come in too late, you want to do it as early as possible. Just make sure, if you miss the 4th, try to do it this week, if you can.
Thank you so much. I think that adds a lot of clarity for folks. The IRS can't get you the payment if they don't have your info. That's the bottom line. So get them your info, whether the deadline has passed or not. The deadline has changed multiple times. It's obviously flexible. So make sure that they have the info that they need in order to process your payment. And make sure they have it as soon as possible. And don't be stressed or anxious about the fact that, it's coming up quick, because in this world right now, everything's coming fast and everything's changing so quickly. But you are entitled to these funds, and we are going to make sure that you have the information that you need. Now it's your responsibility to use it, and you're entitled to support during this pandemic. Darren, you've been doing an incredible job getting the questions to us. We've got 1 minute until 5. So I see this question here. The other ones we've been able to get to, whether it be orally in the presentation or pasting it back over in the chat. One question: what will happen if the bank account and the prison address don't match? I opened a Green Dot account for my husband and got it mailed to my address, but for his address, I put the prison address. Will this create any issues? Does anyone want to respond to that? I can.
So basically it's saying that the address for the account that you set up is going to be different than the address on the form. That's the way I'm interpreting that?
Yes.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that shouldn't be an issue at all, because from my understanding, from the calls I made and talked to people about this, that they're not looking at your banking information beyond the account that you give. So they're going to send it only via that routing and that account number. They're not going to look any further into what your secret passwords are and all that stuff. So it's simply going to be a matter of, they see that, they send it to the bank, and the bank's going to deal with it whether or not they're going to accept it or not, if the name of the person on the check is on the account as well. That's all the bank's going to check. And if that's good, it'll go in. If not, they're going to send it back to the IRS, and the IRS will then send a physical check to the address you put on the filing. So that should not be an issue at all.
Which in this case is the prison. So
yeah.
Good. Thank you so much, Shannon. And thank you so much, Mona. Thank you both for your time. Thank you, Darren, for your finger speed typing work. I appreciate you all. Does anyone have any final words, tips, points to add before we close out?
Just thank you to Amani, all of you, for having me. I appreciate your great work on this.
Yeah, appreciate you setting it up. It's good to get this information out there.
Of course. I appreciate you both for being here. It's definitely much less stressful having other voices to add to the dialogue, and other perspectives to address issues, especially, ones that I haven't come across. So thank you both so much. Thank you everyone who attended, who's watching online. Stay healthy, stay encouraged, and be persistent.
I do have one last point I just thought about before we go.
Yeah.
There was an issue that came up recently. I was talking to Ms. Dermody at the law firm, and they had been telling people to be careful about or not actually file for somebody if somebody was incarcerated, to tell them to not paper file if somebody filed for them online. And we had issues where the IRS was not being incredibly clear if they were going to accept third party filings or not. One hand, they were saying they would accept them, on the other hand, they weren't. And so the catch-22 is that if you then file, it might delay if somebody already filed for you. So to paint the exact picture, say somebody files for you online, or they think they did. They were told that it was accepted by the IRS, and you want to be for sure and file on your own by paper when these forms have started coming out. That could create a delay in the filing process because the IRS is going to have two filings they have to sort through. But at the same time, as you've been saying, delay does not mean denial. So our approach is we would rather have people still file by paper because that's the safest route. That's the one that they will definitely accept. There's not going to be any issue with that. So if somebody did file for you online, and Ms. Dermody confirmed this, that they weren't even clear whether it would be an issue with the IRS is going to do, which is kind of we're having a sense, as like they said, keep filing. They're encouraging people to keep filing past the deadline. We are thinking they're still going to be accepting third-party filings because they've been accepting them, and somebody's not in prison if you're accepting an online filing. So to me that means you're you're like subtly telling us we're accepting them, but we're not going to maybe say that out loud. So just if somebody did file for you and you want to be certain, just know that it might cause a delay, but you would rather have a delay than an all-out denial. And I would still personally say file by paper, even if you think somebody filed for you online, just to be sure.
I do agree. Yeah. Thank you so much for adding that. That's a great point. And I think that that's something that, everyone on the inside is running across. I think, or I hope someone filed for me online, but I'm looking at this paper form and I want to fill it out. Do it. Just do it. Make sure they have your info with your signature from your location. Add the address that you're comfortable with, and add the banking information that you have available if you do. If you don't, then don't worry about it and use your social security number. With that, I will conclude this live stream. I'm going to stop screen sharing. You all be able to find these slides. Here are some resources. Go to the law firm site to find that packet. And if you have any questions, you can find their contact information on that webpage, and they typically respond within a day. So that's going to be the go-to site for anyone who's dealing with this. So thank you all so much. And thank you, Equal Justice Society and the community. And I'll see y'all.
Thank you, Mona. Okay.
Peace.
So that was